Welcome to the Myofascial Health Podcast, hosted by me, Unu. Follow along as I explore the depths of John Barnes' myofascial release approach on my road to mastery. Along the way, I'll be sharing the lessons I learn as I open my myofascial release practice in Austin, Texas, so that you don't have to make the same mistakes I do. Welcome back to the Myofascial Health Podcast. Now, today I'm doing a solo pod, and I'm doing this with a heavy heart. Today is Monday, December 22nd, and on Friday, December 19th, I, as well as many of us in the myofascial release community, came upon the news that John Barnes has passed away. And I'll experience moments and waves of sadness, like many of us. But within those moments, there are also levels of gratitude, because I'm grateful to have gotten to know John as a friend, as a mentor, and it was such an honor to have gotten to learn from him. I think I speak for many of us when I say that he has been able to give us a gift of authentic healing, to have love and joy in our careers. You know, in healthcare, burnout is not uncommon. And I know that I speak for myself when I say that I was on this road to burnout after graduating from physical therapy school and working in an inpatient clinic. And I quit that job to take a risk to learn myofascial release. And that journey is something that I will definitely cherish. And I thank you, John, for being patient with me as that skeptical kid and answering my questions, all of the questions that I had. You know, I've gotten the opportunity to learn from many elders, I'll say. And my questions or inquisitive nature was not always received well. And I'll say that in myofascial release, my curiosity was received with warmth and welcoming. And I just want to thank you, John. You know, you're a man who I felt like pulled up a chair to your table to allow me to sit, to learn from you, learn from others in this community. And that has played a profound influence on my life. So I just want to thank you. And I also want to say that I miss you. And, you know, as I think about the exchanges we've had, it is that I'll miss. You know, our back and forth exchanges, me being able to answer questions or ask questions, and you being able to give me an answer from the heart. You know, I think something that John does very different than other philosophies of thought is he feels the right answer to give. You know, many times when we learn, let's say, the science, there's a scientific rationale on why it is the way that it is. But I could see that in John's seminars, he's feeling for the truth. And you might ask him a question on one day and he might give you an answer. But if you ask a similar question on another day, he might give you another answer. And I think that's because he's feeling into what everybody needs to hear. And it wasn't an answer of right or wrong. It was an answer of truth. And so I will definitely miss that about him. I'll miss his humor. I know that the way that he uses humor keeps the class alive. You know, we're learning about kind of granular science things, which, don't get me wrong, I am very much into. I'm kind of a nerd for the fascia. But it's a topic that can kind of get a little bit monotonous and boring. And so the way that he was able to incorporate his humor, I think kept it very alive and engaging. I'm gonna miss that, definitely. And I'll also say that, there's a level of love that exists that I can feel with him because for someone at his stature, he didn't have to help me or any of us really. And for me to, whether it be ask him to be a guest on my podcast and for him to accept, or for him to just shout me out and say, I have a successful physical therapy and myofascial release clinic. Those moments are pure love because when I think about it, it's not anything he had to do, but that he chose to do. And I know that for me, when I think about the ways I can return that love, it's to carry on his legacy. I think many of us will carry on his legacy now that he's shifted his consciousness to that next energetic state where it's no longer his physical body. And it's through our work, it's through this podcast where I still want to have conversations so that it's not forgotten. I think there are many copycat courses, and it's those of us who speak with the integrity of the work, who stand by the principles in which he taught, that will help carry this legacy on long after he has passed. And when I was able to interview him on my podcast, I remember us talking about this topic of death. And it's been kind of an ongoing joke between us, but now that it's actually here, I will definitely miss him. He talked about the Tibetan Book of the Dead. And he talked about there are these cultures that train people to pass on and meet their demons. And in a nutshell, the Tibetan Book of the Dead teaches that consciousness doesn't vanish instantly at death. There's transitional states that reveal the raw mechanics of the mind. And liberation comes from recognition, not control. And it's what you practice while you're alive that determines how you navigate death. In short, death is not a punishment or judgment. It's a test of familiarity with your own mind. Now, on our conversation, he talked about how when somebody unwinds, that they go through still points or freeze responses. And these still points are that death space. And he said, the more that we unwind, the more we get used to the death space. And then we lose our fear of death. We realize what an absolutely incredible place it is. And he mentioned this concept called the Bardo. And he said that the Bardo is an energetic field that holds so many of our unresolved emotions, traumas, and horrible pains and fears a lot of us have had to go through. And he said in Christian terminology, it's called purgatory, but ultimately it's a transition to another place. And I think that he's transitioned to this other place. And I looked a little bit deeper because I wanted to know more about it. I'm curious by nature. And the Bardo literally translates to movement and flowing on top of a stepping stone or island. And so ultimately, it's a mind island of stillness where you move from death to that next state of being. And the goal of the Bardo state is to liberate the being from samsara, which is the cycle of death and rebirth. And then John had said that enlightenment has a lot of positive ramifications: releasing of pain, eliminating fear, resolving a lot of problems that keep circling back to us because we never really fully get in touch with the feelings associated with it. That's the ultimate goal of myofascial release. You are able to uncover these subconscious patterns, feel what those things were to ultimately process and let it go. And this is such a gift that we have. And I know that for myself, I used to brute force and work through things and ignore the way I was feeling because of whether I felt like that was just the way life was, you had to live with it. And just like he had said, without awareness, there's no choice. Without the awareness that life can be easy or working can be easy, then you just convince yourself that you have to get through it. And so, again, I just want to thank you, John, for allowing me to get in touch with my feminine essence, this feeling intelligence, to feel my intuition, to recognize that it doesn't have to be a certain way. The idea that it should be a certain way doesn't exist. And it's ultimately the way that it feels the best to me. And, we talk about synchronicities, and I happen to think that the day that you passed coincided with a certain comet, and the scientific name for that comet is 3-Eye Atlas. So if anyone's been following along, on the morning of Friday, December 19th, this comet was the closest to the Earth. And this is going to be a non-myofascial release thing, so don't put this on myofascial release. This is not associated with John, but this is something that was drawing my attention, so I just wanted to speak on it. And ultimately, there's a Hopi prophecy that the blue star will end the fourth world. And without getting too much into the depth of it, all it is it's a return to harmony. And those who have purity in their hearts, live with humility, protect life, and walk in balance with the earth will survive this next shift, And ultimately, it's about cycles, endings, and renewals. And that's kind of something that I was reminded of when I think about John's life. When I look at his life, the cycles, the endings, and the renewals, I can say that John lived a life worth living. And when we ask ourselves that question, am I living a life worth living? You have to really unpack what you're living for. And, I got to know John, I think, in the wisest form. And the form of him, which was teaching these seminars on stage. And I do feel like, you're on, and it's okay. I'll just say that the version of John that I got to know and interact with was maybe the best form of him. Do I think he was like that all the time? Probably not. And he's just a human. We're all just humans doing the best that we can. And I know that maybe he has parts of himself that didn't resonate the best with most people, or maybe harsh, but I don't forget the mission that he was on. He developed Myofascial Release to introduce authentic healing to the world, and he dreamed big enough where this movement is going to last beyond his life. And so I just want to thank you, John, once again. You played a huge influence on my life as well as many others. And I hope that we continue the work that meets your standards, that we stay true to your principles. And I hope that as you transition, that you do that with peace. I know you didn't do it with fear. And I'm so happy to have gotten to know you. Thanks for listening to another episode of Myofascial Health. I help myofascial release therapists create beautiful websites for their MFR practices, even if they aren't tech savvy. If you're just starting your MFR practice, or you're an experienced MFR practice owner, learn more about how I can help at www.myofascial.health/website.